All right. Hello and hi and welcome to a very special Harry Potter Abridged. Why special, you may ask? And it would be a good question, of course, if you were paying attention. You might already know. Yeah, I wish I had okay, so once, in another lifetime, I actually did do, some part-time radio DJing in life at two different stations in two different places, actually. The first was a top 40 station. That was, I'm not going to talk about when that was. That's neither here nor there. By the way, boy, this could be the most tangenty Harry Potter Abridged episode to date. No promises, but it's feeling like that out of the gate. Yes, one more. Yeah, so I actually started recording this episode a couple of days ago, and that has now been deleted. It just didn't go. Things didn't go well. I got tired. I had worked all day, like physically worked all day, and I was tired, and my energy went blue, and it was over. So yes, 4 tangents later, can we get back? Excuse me. Right. Well, the second and the third thing, or however you look at it, going backwards, are kind of related to the same thing. But so it's my birthday. Hooray. And someone very amazing and very special made a very hilarious compilation of outtakes from this abridged series that I'm doing with your help. And just thinking about it, I can't help but laugh because, like, it cuts me in, like, the most, not cuts me, like, in a bad way, cuts me, like, pain. I mean, when I'm talking about, I mean, edits. Hearing all of the ridiculous things that I've said, edited in such a brilliant way, I haven't laughed that hard in a long time, and since, well, except for the fact that I have gone back and like listened to it like probably 5 times at least, and that was all yesterday. Anyway, which was the tangent back to hi, it's my birthday, which was the tangent back to I used to work in radio, and I had the thought when I was about to mention that it was my birthday initially, like 5 minutes ago or whenever that was. I wanted to be able to cue up the fucking the Beatles song, the birthday song. Blah, na, 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 na. Anyway, yeah, that was a thought inside of a thought, inside of a thought, inside of a thought. And so now that brings us back to so it's a special on a next on a very special Harry Potter Abridged. It's that because not only is it my birthday, you know, which again, and again, I have like the desire to be able to press a button and have Monty Python, and there was much rejoicing, yay. But alas, I have to just do impersonations of these things. Some will groan, others will be entertained. That is life. And yes, since it is my birthday, it is worth mentioning that preparations that once were audible and on screen are now taking... Well, they happen tonight. That's what I'm trying to say. In addition to evening coffee, because fuck it, it's my birthday. All right, that's the last time well, it may not be. I'm not going to make any promises, but we're moving on nonetheless. Harry Potter. So the other half of why this is a very special episode, aside from the fact that I've said that like 5 times, and now you're just going to believe it regardless, right? Isn't that how it works? Maybe not. It is the final chapter in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I had a much better way of saying this last time, where it seemed like I was saying I was going to quit doing it or something, but I really wasn't. But it was more cleverly worded, and then the last word, gave it away, and you're like, son of a bitch. Too bad. Not this time, guys. Not this time. Anyway, now that we get to that, this is chapter 17. And if I said 16 earlier, I can't remember if I did, then, well, that was wrong, because it's chapter 17, episode 17, and that chapter is called The Man with Two Faces. And this is worth doing the previously thing by saying that this chapter starts right where it picks up right where the previous chapter left off. Excuse me. And that previous chapter left off, as you may or may not remember, depending on how recently you have been listening, ends with Harry leaving Hermione after Hermione basically solved the last problem before this last situation. Because it was just a logic problem, and for Hermione that was easy, so she knocked it out of the park, as we would expect, and Harry was able to proceed while heroically, and bravely sending Hermione back to go take care of Ron. Because hero arc. Those are 2 words that aren't necessarily easy to say in front of, like, next to each other in that order at any kind of speed. I really hope that's not a phone call that I'm missing. And just some text message or some shit. Anyway, right. And so Harry moves on, and he comes to the last room or chamber or whatever, and there's somebody there, as he might have suspected, since the door was ajar and the music was playing for Fluffy and all of that stuff, and the key had been used to get through the door once, and etc. The troll was knocked out, and all of these things had already kind of happened, even though the chess set somehow magically... Okay, fine, not somehow. Not somehow. I mean, Dumbledore and fucking Slughorn completely put a completely... Oh, wow, completely put a completely... Nice. Double word score. They put a completely ransacked house back together in like a matter of seconds. So I suppose it's not really a stretch. I know I got into this in the last episode. I'm sorry. I don't know why it bugs me when I've solved it. Maybe it's because it bugged me for so long and I didn't actually think about it that like I keep forgetting that I've solved it. Maybe. Whatever. This very special episode might be special for other reasons. Oh man. Wow, and I'm just like, I don't have a pop screen. I'm just poop all over the place and like distorting the microphone and just it's special, all right. Right, so Harry moves into the final chamber, and it turns out that it's not Voldemort, it's not Snape, it's Quirrell. And so, the big reveal, and except that I'm pretty sure I already spoiled that somewhere along the way, but whatever, there it is. And Harry, of course, in classic fashion, he's like, you, and and suddenly, of course, Quirrell is no longer the stuttering, bumbling, petrified, scared, terrified, perpetually terrified. Yeah, that was pretty much how he kind of carried himself. He's no longer that. He is, let's see. His laugh is described as no longer quivering, but now cold and sharp. And he speaks normally. He speaks strongly, I guess is a word. I mean, it is a word, I guess, but I guess it's the right word. He with authority might be a better way to put it. And so, yeah, Harry's like, basically, is what. If that sounds as cool as it sounded in my headphones, then that was totally a sound effects win, because I just made that shit up at the last second. But wow. All right. Very special. Right. And so, yeah, Harry's like, but I thought Snape? What? And Quirrell's like, yeah. Snape seems like a good choice. He is a dick. And he definitely doesn't like you. Okay, he doesn't say that yet, but it's coming. And he's like, yeah, next to him, who would suspect me being all, shivery, quirrelly, blah 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 blah. Which is, it's true. I mean, even though in retrospect, Quirrell seems almost over the top, it's like the world that Rowling created has some sort of over the top characters that are legit over the top. And so it's like he would stand out if everybody was blasé, but nobody's blasé. So where if it's when it's your first time through, I mean, even for this first book, I mean, which is a bit scaled down compared to what some of the future volumes hold, it's still a pretty it's a good twist. What a twist! It's a good twist. Did anybody ever watch Robot Chicken? I'm a fan, but anyway, there was a skit, whatever you want to call it, sketch. What do you call it? Vignette, one of those words. About M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, whatever, however you say his last name. Fuck, who knows? But yeah, he kept running around saying, "What a twist!" Right. I'm like kind of sorry for how ridiculous I am right now, but then I'm also hoping that you're laughing with me and not just kind of groaning at me. Hoping real hard. Right, so we're back to Harry with his mind blown about like and just trying to comprehend, wait a minute. This whole year, ever since I laid eyes on this asshole Snape, I felt like he was up to something, or at least I felt like he was not a good character. Then I get what I seem to think is absolute proof that he is the villain. He's the bad guy. He's doing the wrong thing, and we find out now that it's not just that he sucks, he also is working for Voldemort, is the hypothesis that Harry's been working on pretty much most of this school year. And now he shows up, and Quirrell is there. The last teacher, the last person that he would expect to run into. Like, the bottom of the list. So yeah, even though Quirrell has assumed a completely different manner, and even though he's saying things pretty coherently, Harry's just like, but no. And so Harry's like, he's trying to grasp onto reason. He's trying to like make sense out of this. And so he's like, okay, wait a minute. Snape tried to kill me. It's not. Why isn't he? And Quirrell's like, no. I tried to kill you. Snape was trying to save you. And he's like, say. Again. And so, page 2. Oh, wow. Very special indeed. And so, yeah, it's mentioned that that's why Snape actually refereed that match between them and Hufflepuff. And, that's just another, like, it's just like constant, like, cognitive dissonance, right? That's how you say that, right? Cognitive dissonance. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, yeah, those words. It's like, it's just not registering. He's hearing the words and he understands what they mean, but he's having trouble believing that they're true, even though all evidence is to suggest that they probably are true, because Quirrell never seemed like he could be the way he's being right now, as far as his style of communication and the things he's saying. And so, yeah, and Quirrell makes a mention, too, that, it didn't really even need to happen. Like, Snape didn't need to be the referee, because once Dumbledore was there watching the match, there was pretty much no chance for Quirrell to do anything anyway. So, yeah. And Quirrell's like, well, doesn't really matter, because gonna kill you tonight. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And so, in a move that, by the way, doesn't happen in the movie, because in whatever year that was, the special effects required to produce like ropes out of thin air and then bind somebody up just wouldn't have probably looked. Either that or it would have cost too much, one of the two. But I'm thinking it wouldn't have even looked right. Like, now, I feel like that could happen, and it would, like, if an upcoming movie in the Fantastic Beast requires somebody to cast this exact spell, is it Incarcerus? Maybe that is it. I couldn't remember it the last time I was doing this, but I think that's right. Anyway, I think they could do it now and make it look believable. But I think in the whatever year it was that they made the first Harry Potter movie, I think that wasn't a good idea. They changed other things too. Obviously, this is kind of a, relatively speaking, a minor thing. But there are some interesting differences in this chapter, between this chapter and the final scenes of the movie, which I will, in some cases, touch on. But yeah, pretty interesting. Right. And so, anyway, yeah, because in the movie, what happens is that, and this is kind of interesting because, in the movie, the troll, the knocked out troll, and the chamber that Hermione and Harry get stuck in together with the potions and the logic puzzle, neither of those made it to the movie. It's just get past Fluffy, get past the devil snare, get past the keys, and the chess set. Which, granted, that is several things, so, you can kind of see why they might have, but it sucks because the logic puzzle is where Hermione shines, and instead she just gets her books and cleverness line from the book. And she doesn't hug Harry, which in the book has impact, in my opinion, but may have looked silly with the child actors. Because somebody mentioned to me not too long ago, and I guess I'd noticed this, but it's like it just put it more into focus that Hermione has very high emotional intelligence points, if you will. Just very advanced for her age, almost more than would be feasible, but it's not so ridiculous that it's like completely unbelievable either. It's like it just rides that line between being like almost too much and like still being like, okay, she just has really fucking mature parents or something, and it's just the way she is. So right. Anyway, okay, hang on. Off in a tangent in my head, and I'm like, where am I in this actual book that I'm holding here? Oh, right. What is and what isn't in the movie. Anyway, so yeah, after the chess set thing with Ron getting his big win and taking his little sacrifice, which I mean I don't mean to minimize. It's just that after that, Hermione's moment's totally cut off. Apologies. And so back to the actual book here, and so Harry is well, Quirrell kind of goes on about Snape, and he's like, yeah, he really didn't do himself any favors with this whole like demanding to be the referee thing. He made himself unpopular, it was said. So it's one of those things where we get a little hint about Snape because. For the most part, the Hogwarts faculty doesn't. You're not going to catch them in front of students or anybody. Talking bad about other teachers, even if they're not particularly actually fond of them. And we learn way later that most of the teachers had like their suspicions about Snape. Or at least that's what they say, and I think most of them are being honest. After Snape does something really bad later, which. Again, it's like I definitely don't completely steer away from the spoilers, but we're spreading them out as I've said. And that one, just in case you actually are going through this as you're reading, that's not one that I feel comfortable dropping just yet. Anyway, so. But Quirrell makes the point of saying that Snape made himself unpopular, and of course that also has to do with students, I'm sure too. But I think that is also a reflection of the staff, which is kind of interesting. But and so yeah, and then we get a mention of Halloween because this is the scene that like if this were a murder mystery, our hero detective person would have just caught the bad guy, and the bad guy is like, or maybe sometimes like in especially English, British, whatever murder mystery type deals, like sometimes like this is just I think it's like a stylistic thing maybe, but when the bad guy's finally sort of cornered but maybe not like arrested yet, like they have their like little boastful confession moment where they I mean, granted, this isn't exactly how this is going because it's not like Harry is in the position of power here at all. He's bound and basically immobile, which create. I mean, and sometimes that's another situation that happens with these mystery novel type situations is that like sometimes it's the bad guy person doesn't doesn't realize that they're caught, and so they're boastful about whatever their crimes have been and the details, and they like to. There's like that expression of their cleverness, like, and then I did this, and then I did that, and that's how I got over on your ass, and nah 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 type shit. And so yeah, so there's mention of Halloween, and Quirrell's like, I thought maybe that you might have seen me, going up to the third floor, and Harry's like, you let the troll in, you little bastard. And Quirrell mentions that, well, he says, yeah, certainly. And he mentions having a special gift with trolls. And I don't really understand how being able to knock out a troll gives. I guess he got the other one into this. So, like, how did he even get them in? How do you get trolls into fucking Hogwarts? Like, okay, it's one thing to climb to the top of the tallest tower and have some people swoop in and pick up a dragon. Side-along apparition with the, but you can't apparate into. Okay, Hermione, I hear you. No, I haven't read Hogwarts history, Hermione. I'm sorry. How the fuck do you get a troll into Hogwarts? Are they already around? Are there some just lurking in some deep, dark dungeon chamber of other secrets? I need answers, Sway. So anyway, yeah. Every so often, I catch myself saying one of the silly things that I say, and I suddenly am reminded of that compilation, which does a very amazing job of pointing out how many times I say certain things. The answer is a lot. A fucking lot. But, whatever. Like, I mean, you guys seem to be okay with it most of the time, and hopefully this will be one of those times. Because I'm afraid that I'm, like, treading the line right now between, like, being remotely entertaining and being, like, really fucking annoying. So I'm trying really hard to stay on the good side of that line. I promise. Anyway, and then, right, so he has a special gift with trolls, does Quirrell. Whatever that means. But then he mentions, Quirrell does, that Snape headed him off when he was trying to go. Because, obviously the whole point of creating the diversion with the troll was for him to try and get in and get that Philosopher's Stone and get the fuck out. And then there would have been no more Defense against the Dark Arts teacher. But, which would have, opened up a whole free period for, like, the rest of the year, unless, Dumbledore was able to hire an immediate replacement. Anyway, alternate universe spotter ideas. Quirrell gets Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort comes back early. Shit goes sideways. Write it, someone. No, don't. It's cool. We already had the Cursed Child. Enough fanfic already. Anyway, obviously that plan didn't work out because Snape headed Quirrell off and stopped him from getting in. But which leads me to the, like, why? Oh, wait a minute. I guess Snape didn't know that Fluffy was there, so that's why he got, like, the scratch or the bite or whatever, because he had to get the hell out of there real quick, like, even though somehow Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville were able to, like, just stumble in there and get back out without dying, without even being touched. Let me rephrase. And yet Snape, who for all his faults is an incredibly accomplished wizard, and he gets scratched. Or no, I don't think it was a bite, because if it was a bite, he wouldn't have a fucking leg. I mean, there's 3 heads, but all of them were huge. It's a giant fucking dog. Okay, anyway. And so, yeah, and then Quirrell's like, all right, so now that we've had our little chat, shut up and let me look at this mirror again. And then Harry realizes that it's the Mirror of Erised and the Mirror of Desire. And Quirrell has deduced, brilliant chap that he is, that the mirror is the key to figuring out how to get the stone. But he underestimates the whole situation. That's neither here nor there either. Just now, though. And so now Harry's like had a moment to sort of to kind of realize that, okay, this is insane, but I'm pretty sure that it's true now. Like, it's starting to sink in. That's my take on how this is going. And Harry now realizes that, like, oh shit. So if Quirrell keeps looking at the mirror, he might figure out how to get the stone. And if he gets the stone, then Voldemort's coming back. And if Voldemort comes back, well, then I'm probably going to get killed. So all he can think to do now is to distract him. And so now he starts, and it's like it's good, because at the same time he's also asking questions that, like, ultimately he probably would have wanted to ask anyway, but he's doing it with sort of like the intention of, like, well, all right, let me just keep asking questions, because the more I distract him, the less likely he is to figure out what the next move is towards getting the stone. So he's like, so, but I saw you and Snape in the forest, which, again, like I said, disbelieving Harry would want to know the answer to that little, conversation. Like, what was it about? And Quirrell's just like, yeah, that happened. He was trying to frighten me, but he suspected me all along. Which, I mean, to be fair, Snape is pretty good at, like, spotting bullshit. Except for his own. But yeah, in other people, he's exceptional at it. He's also a very accomplished Legiman's, so is that how you say that? Now I feel like unsure. The spell is Legilimens. Whatever, you know what the fuck I'm saying. He can read minds. And so, yeah, so Quirrell's still, like, pacing around the mirror, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's like, I see myself giving Voldemort the, well, he doesn't, he says my master. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong sentence. He's like, I've got the stone, I'm giving it to my master, but he's like, but where is it? And Harry's like, and he's trying to, like, struggle against the ropes, but that's, of course, not giving him any luck there. And so he's like, all right, more distraction questions, but he's like, but Snape hates me, like, what WTF? Like, he hates me, bro. So, like, surely he's the bad guy. And Quirrell's like, no, Snape does hate you. That's not an act, actually. And I think it's interesting. Of all people, Harry finds this out from Quirrell, but he's like, he was at Hogwarts with your father, didn't you know? They kind of hated each other, as it turns out. But he didn't want to kill you. And then Harry remembers something else. He's got a lot of these things, but it's been a long school year, and now he's just finally getting to confront the perpetrator of all this shit. So he's like, I got some questions, bro. You got some explaining to do. And he's like, but I heard you the other day, and you sounded like all, like you were sobbing and shit. And that's the first time that, like, after Quirrell's been maintaining, like, this, I can't even say facade, but just this air of sort of authority and being in control of the situation. This is the first time that, like, you see a spasm of fear flitting across his face. And he doesn't say it, but it's almost like you can tell that he sort of cowers a little bit. And he's like, sometimes I find it hard to follow my master's instructions. And that's the first time that he says that he is weak. He says, my master is a great wizard. He said, but I am weak. Paraphrasing. And Harry's like, wait a minute. You mean he was in the classroom? Dragons and trolls, okay, whatever, but Voldemort was inside of Hogwarts. And that's when Quirrell's like, he is with me wherever I go. And we find out how they came to be attached. And just for a quick contrast to the movie in this scene, because things start off fairly similarly, but then in the movie, Voldemort's voice is heard earlier and more often, and he sort of like takes control of the situation way sooner. Whereas in the book, Quirrell is pretty much in control of the conversation for a while. And then eventually things start to shift a bit. But and in this little bit where he starts to talk about Voldemort, we sort of see things that mirror and echo Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail's time with Voldemort in the seventh book, which I think is kind of interesting. I feel like there's a lot of mirroring or whatever you want to say, it's imagery, but it's like what's the word? We'll go with imagery. Anyway, there's things that are in common between the first book and the seventh book. I don't know if that trend continues in other words, if the second and the sixth book having things in common, and the third and the fourth, etc., etc. I don't know about that. I feel like at one point I did feel that way, but I can't remember if I actually how substantiated those ideas were. I guess we'll see as we go. But I definitely believe that between the first and the seventh books, there are definitely shared themes and things that are meant to sort of reference each other. And I guess you could argue that most of those were added in the seventh book to reflect the first one, or reflect against the first one or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I think it may be a little bit of both. And maybe it's more of the first thing, but I think it could also be that she was trying to, even just an outline form, be like, okay, this is going to be kind of like that. Or they're going to, Anyway. Yes. Because Quirrell then goes on to sort of talk about the lessons he learned from Voldemort about, how he was young and foolish and full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil. And this line is given to Voldemort in the movie, but Quirrell says that that he learned from. So he's kind of quoting Voldemort, so it's whatever. But he's like, there is no good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it. And that's pretty much falls in line with Voldemort's whole MO. Because he thinks of himself as the most powerful, and therefore, in his book, the best. So Quirrell mentions that he's not. Ever since then, he's served Voldemort faithfully, and he mentions that he's been very hard on him, which again mirrors the whole Wormtail story. Especially, we get to see that in the prologue for, I think it's, wait a minute, is that the sixth book? The Riddle House? That's not the prologue to the seventh book, right? That's the prologue to the... It must be the sixth. Well, no, wait a minute. Or is it the fifth book? It is the fifth book. It is Order of the Phoenix, I think. Anyway, there's a chapter that deals with the recently resurrected. No. He's not resurrected yet. He's in like a subhuman form, but Voldemort's not. He's more than he is here in this book. That's got to be the prologue to the fifth book. Anyway, we get a look at how Voldemort, even then in a weaker state, treats his lowest of servants. Even if they're the only ones that are taking care of him, he's still pretty shit to them. Which only ends up making them weaker, so it's like instead of becoming better servants, they become sort of like worse, or they at least stay at a certain level of ineptitude, and that's kind of like not actually very helpful. But, Voldemort's very impatient. And well, it's not even that he's impatient. He just really, like, he can't accept any kind of fault and weakness in others, because he sees himself as so perfect. It's like a bad sports coach, like one of those former star athletes who tries to be a coach and only to realize that, like, they don't really understand how coaching works because they were so gifted naturally that they didn't really have to learn the way that other people's had to learn. That's why, like, ex-players who were, like, only kind of good but really had a good understanding of the game, but they weren't, like, amazingly talented physically, they had to work for everything they got, so they understand what good coaching means. That's Voldemort is the one who is, like, sort of the gifted athlete. I mean, and even though that's not the perfect analogy, in a way, I mean, in the wizarding world, he was prefect, head boy, top of the class pretty much, and even though it was in an act that was actually really quite heinous and caused Hagrid his wand and his graduation from Hogwarts, he received a special award for services to the school. So yeah, I mean, he was kind of like the guy, even though he came from an orphanage and he had questionable lineage and all that. Like, in school, he was like that dude. And so yeah, when he goes, to the dark side, so to speak, and becomes Lord Voldemort, he can't. He has some weak people in his service sometimes, and sometimes because they're the only people he can find, like in this case, and later again with Wormtail. But instead of like finding a way to like make them better or encourage them, which I guess again would not really fit the profile for a bad guy, but even then there are some who have like nefarious intent, but are still not like horrible to the people who are loyal to them. But yeah, he doesn't inspire confidence, that Voldemort guy. And it's mentioned that he does not forgive mistakes easily. And we get mention of the failed attempt of the theft of the stone at Gringotts, which of course it was gone because of Hagrid's doing what Dumbledore asked him to do and doing it right. And Harry realizes, oh shit, I saw fucking Quirrell that day, you know. And Harry thinks he should have suspected something, but of course there's no way he could have. I mean, a teacher at the Leaky Cauldron, not really a big deal, you know. But anyway, Quirrell's still trying to figure out the mirror. He can't figure it out. Harry's trying to figure out like what he needs to do to try and like get the stone. And he's like, he's like right now there's nothing more that I desire than to get the stone so that, you know, Quirrell can't. So if I look in the mirror, I'll figure out how to get the stone. So he's trying to like wiggle his way over there, even though he's completely bound from like, you know, fucking ankle to shoulder probably. And in the midst of that, he falls over, and Quirrell just doesn't even really look at him. It's just like, whatever. And and then finally in here in the book, again, as opposed to the movie where Voldemort becomes involved way earlier and more often, Quirrell finally actually like calls out to his master and asks him for help, and a voice, to Harry's horror, a voice answers, and it's Voldemort. It's the first time we get Voldemort actually speaking in the first person. And of course he tells Quirrell to use the boy. And it's also when we finally get the Voldemort reveal in the movie, it's, I don't know, the special effects aren't horrible, they're not great either, and it's also kind of a shame that and I mean this happens, you know, but it's a shame they hadn't been able to either, at least if not cast Fiennes for the role, at least decide how the face was gonna look. But I mean, it's like the people who worked on the first movie aren't even the same people who worked on the last, or like 4 and 5, and you know, well, it's a shame that movie for Goblet of Fire is the book. Well, in the book it's fine, but it's a shame that that's the movie that Voldemort has to come back in, because it's by far the worst of the 8 movies. Ugh. All right. Anyway, moving on. And so, so Voldemort tells him to use the boy, and so Quirrell like claps his hands, and the Incarcerus spell is somehow undone by a hand clap, and instead of a counter curse with a wand, which probably would have been what she did later, but you know, whatever. And so now he's like, all right, come stand in front of the mirror and tell me what you see. And Harry's like, all right, well, I'm obviously gonna have to lie about this. And so Harry looks in the mirror and he sees himself, and then his reflection version smiles and puts his hand into a pocket his pocket and pulls out the stone, and then it winks and puts the stone back in its pocket. And when that happens, Harry feels, oh, the stone is in me pockets. And I will say, that little part plays out almost identically, if not identically, in the movie. And I will say, score one for Radcliffe, because like he totally, for all his faults in playing Harry, he totally pulls off the second version of himself really well, like doing the little wink and smile and pulling the stone out and putting it back in his pocket thing, like better than Harry's own reaction, even though it's the same actor. Anyway, yeah. And so, yeah, Harry lies and says that he sees himself shaking hands with Dumbledore and he's won the House Cup. And Quirrell's like, sure, right. But then Voldemort calls back that he's lying. He lies. He lies. And so Quirrell calls him back. And then Voldemort speaks again, and he's like, let me speak to him. And so then they go back and forth, and Quirrell's like, but you're not strong enough. And he's like, but I have strength for this. And Harry's just like, what the fuck is going on? It was already hard enough to believe the things that he had to believe, but this shit's just getting like out of hand. And so now he watches as Quirrell starts to undo this bizarre turban that he's been wearing this year. No big deal that, he's just a regular old white dude in England wearing a turban. Like, the fuck? Nobody really questions it, except, well, some people do kind of make fun of it, but like Fred and George. But nobody, none of the teachers, nobody's like, what's under the old turban there, buddy? What you doing with a turban on? I mean, not that you couldn't. It's just not. Okay, fine. And so, yeah, he takes it off, and we find out that there was a reason that things also smelled funny and looked funny. And he turns around to basically to face his back to Harry, and Harry is like truly petrified, terrified at this point. Like it says, he would have screamed, but he couldn't make any sound. That's how he's frozen. Without having the full body bind put on him. And so, yeah, Harry sees... And see, the description here is... Yeah, anyway, chalk white face, glaring red eyes, and slits for nostrils. Snake-like. And Voldemort addresses Harry, and starts complaining about being shadow and vapor, and how he has to share other people's bodies, but there's always people willing to let him into their hearts and minds. And he mentions the unicorn blood, and how, he knows that Harry saw Quirrell drinking that blood for him. And now he's like, and I'm about to be able to make some elixir of life, and so I can get my own body. And of course, Voldemort's deduced somehow, magically, that Harry has the stone in his pocket. So he, he calls him on it, basically. And Harry starts to stumble backward, like he's finally able to move, because he was totally frozen for a minute there. And Voldemort taunts Harry about his parents too. He's like, don't try to flee or you'll meet the same end as your parents, and he's like, they died begging for mercy. And that's when Harry, and this sort of breaks down some of the fundamental and doesn't this happen more than once? This kind of conversation, now that I think about it, where Voldemort tries to to make Harry's parents look like cowards, and Harry only calls him out as being a liar, like he does here, and then Voldemort's like, okay, fine, they weren't really cowards, but your mom didn't have to die, BTW. I told her she could move, and I would just try to kill you, but no, had to make me kill her too. And this is also interesting too, because it says your father, he's like, I killed your father first and he put up a courageous fight, which is also a lie. Not that he wouldn't have, but he had laid his wand down on the couch or something, and so James wasn't able to put up a courageous fight. There is no way to put up a courageous fight to the Avada Kedavra spell. That's just the end. If you don't have a wand to block it, or a way to disappear, or apparate, do something, you're pretty much screwed. It's green light and dead. And so yeah. Anyway, but Voldemort's very childish when it comes to his taunting. He likes to try and lie to people in a way that will cause them to be more outraged and inflamed. And so yeah, now he's basically begging for the stone. Not begging, but he's demanding the stone, and Harry's like, never. And so Voldemort commands Quirrell to seize him, which I understand that this sets up what's about to happen. But for all intents and purposes, all that really needed to happen, Quirrell turns back around, pulls out his wand, aims it at Harry, and kills him, or at least attempts to. That would be the cold-hearted killer way of going about this. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Voldemort does like his theatrics to a degree, but really sees him in retrospect, whatever. I mean, maybe Voldemort meant magically bring him to you, and maybe Quirrell just decided to take it more literally because he was panicking or something, and Voldemort's yelling in his head, literally. And so, anyway, Quirrell comes over and grabs, or runs to him, whatever, and grabs a hold of his wrist, and then Harry's scar basically bursts into pain, and but at the same time, Quirrell suddenly is in pain. Quirrell lets go of him, and he sees that Quirrell, his hand, the hand he used to grab Harry, is all blistered and burned looking. And Voldemort's yelling at him to seize him again. Well, not with the again. And so Quirrell immediately lunges back into action and grabs Harry, or knocks him off his feet, and then puts his hands around Harry's neck. Again, you got a wand, you don't have to strangle him, but whatever. He's panicking. I'm gonna go with that. And then his hands burn, both of his hands burn, as he's holding Harry's neck. And so, and every time this happens, of course, because of the Voldemort thing and other things that we'll learn about later, Harry's scar is on fire every time Quirrell touches him. So there's sort of the feeling of burning and actual burning going on opposite sides of this or this interaction, as it were. And Quirrell's like, I can't hold him. My hands, my eyes, the goggles, they do nothing. Hopefully there's at least one Simpsons fan that'll get that reference. One's enough. And even Voldemort's like, just kill him and be done. And that's when Quirrell finally does actually pick up his wand, and he's getting ready to, perform the curse. And Harry's like, what if I touch him with my hands? It's the touching that's causing the burning, right? So Harry reaches up and touches Quirrell's face, which, to his credit, pretty smart. I mean, like, go for a place that's going to completely be sensitive and, like, completely throw off your orientation of what you're doing. So, and Quirrell just, like, loses it. I mean, like, it's really, really painful. And so Harry's like, well, all I have to do, even though this is, like, burning my scar up, but I'm not physically burning, I have to hold on to him. And, so he does. And everything kind of starts to blur, and Harry's like on the verge of passing out, basically, and he hears Quirrell shrieking, and he hears Voldemort yelling, kill him, kill him. And then he hears another voice calling, and he thinks it's his own head calling, Harry, Harry. And then he feels Quirrell's arm wrenched from his grasp, and then he falls into blackness. Down, down, down. End scene. And then we open the next scene because, this is the final. I feel like this would have been like 2 chapters in a upcoming volume, but in this first book she just chooses to like do the asterisk cut scene, come to another scene. So the next scene, Harry sees something gold above him, and he's like, the snitch, which doesn't make any sense, but he's half asleep as it turns out, and he's like, I need to catch it, but he can't pick up his arms. And then he blinks, and he realizes that, oh, wait a minute, that's not the snitch, that's a pair of glasses. Wait a minute. And he blinks again, and then he realizes that, oh, it's Dumbledore. And I kind of think this is something they did, minor detail, really, but in the movie, Harry just sort of wakes up on his own, sits up, puts on his glasses, and like as he's putting on his glasses, Dumbledore just sort of like lets himself into the hospital, like right on cue. Which, whatever. He's Dumbledore. He can have amazing timing. That's cool, I guess. But it's kind of cooler in the book that Harry just sort of wakes up and Dumbledore's already there, like to kind of imply that he's just been sitting by the bed and sort of like, checking him out. Maybe he even, cast a little spell to help bring him out of it for a minute or something. But maybe Harry just wakes up and Dumbledore's been hanging out there for a little while. Either way, I kind of like that. And then Harry's like, wait a minute, Dumbledore. And he's like, the stone and Quirrell and the stone, sir. And Dumbledore's like, calm yourself, little boy. And yeah, he's like, you're kind of behind the times, Harry. Like things are under control, and Quirrell does not have the stone. Oh, and so real quick, backtracking. I'm sorry, I just thought about this from the last scene, from the previous scene where Harry is touching Quirrell and stuff. In the movie, they have it where every time like Quirrell kind of gets burned, it like burns him all the way to like to char, like because he like basically turns into like what looks almost like coals or something, and like then it just sort of turns into dust. Like he completely disintegrates in those places. He doesn't just burn and like welt up and like blister and stuff. And it creates like a different situation. Whereas like in the book, like we just saw Harry like just basically as he's hanging on to Quirrell to keep him, from being able to do anything and get the stone. He just sort of fades to black, like he passes out from all the pain and the struggle that he's going through. Whereas in the movie, as the more that Harry touches Quirrell, like I said, he starts to sort of like literally burn up and disintegrate, and then all of this disintegrated Quirrell like somehow reforms in the air as like some sort of like cloud that then like has a face of Voldemort in the front of the cloud, and the cloud like passes through Harry somehow, and that knocks him out, not the pain from touching Quirrell. And then Harry wakes up in the hospital wing, like I was just saying, and then Dumbledore strides in at the perfect moment. And it's just, I don't know, the impact isn't the same. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the first time I saw it, I mean, of course I love the movie, but, I've seen it quite a number of times and read the book several times since then. Several. So anyway, yeah, Dumbledore's like, dude, stone's safe. Quirrell's gone. Like he does not have the stone. And also chill out, because Madame Pomfrey is not above kicking my ass out of here, even though I'm the headmaster. So let's relax it. Let's take it down a few notches, young man. And then that's when Harry kind of realizes, looks around. He's like, I am in the hospital wing. Oh, right, I'm in a bed here. And then he realizes that there's like sweets and stuff all over the place, because his friends and admirers have sent him sweets, because that's what you do when your friend's in the hospital. You send them sweets, duh. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, so what happened in the dungeon down there, of course, is a complete secret, so naturally the entire school knows. Which is kind of strange. Like, who's the leaker here? Like, really? How does that happen? Like, I feel like in real life that's not how things work. Like leaks only happen when somebody who knows what's going on tells someone. And you mean, I don't think Ron or Hermione told anyone. So how? And if Quirrell's dead, how? Explain that. I don't understand it. Anyway, and we get mentioned that Fred and George had brought a toilet seat, basically, which they no doubt thought would be amusing as a get well gift for Harry, but it's been confiscated. And that's when Harry's like, wait a minute, all this is crazy, but how long have I been here? And Dumbledore's like, yeah, 3 days. And he makes mention that Ron and Hermione will be very relieved that he's finally awake, and that they've been really worried. And Harry's like, okay, but you still didn't tell me like what's actually happening with the stone. Like, just appease me here, Dumbledore. Just come on, work with me, buddy. And Dumbledore's like, all right, fine, you are a stubborn SOB. So fine, the stone. And And he's like, Quirrell never managed to get it from you. He's like, I got there in time to prevent that. And he said, although you were doing quite well on your own. And Harry's like, wait a minute, you got there? Did you get an owl from Hermione? And Dumbledore's like, actually, about the time I got to London, somehow I decided that maybe I should be back at the school. And so I doubled back, and there I was. And Dumbledore, mentions that he arrived just in time to pull Quirrell off of Harry, and Harry's like, oh, that was who. Right, oh, okay, okay, that was you. And Dumbledore says that he feared that he may have been too late, and Harry was like, you almost were. He almost got the stone. And Dumbledore's like, no. I'm talking about you. You almost died. And he's like, by the way, the stone's going to be destroyed. And Harry's like, whoa, wait. We just went through all this and now you're going to destroy the fucking thing? And Dumbledore's like, yeah, that's going to be for the best. Trust me on this one. And Harry's like, but Flamel and Perenelle, or whatever her name is, and he's like, yeah, Dumbledore's like, yes, they will in fact die. They've got enough of this elixir stuff to set their affairs in order, but then yes, they'll be checking out. And Dumbledore, as he's prone to do, says one of those, it's a wise thing to say, I guess, but it's just, it's a Dumbledore-ism, maybe, as it were. But basically he says, for Nicholas and Perenelle, I think that's how you say that name, it's really like going to bed after a very, very long day. And we get another one of those great Dumbledore quotes right after that. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. And then Dumbledore goes on to point out that the stone really wasn't such a great thing after all, because all it did was give you money and more life, which are the two things that human beings would choose above all things, but that humans are really bad at picking picking things that are good for them, meaning that they're great at picking the things that are worse for them. And Harry just woke up from 3 days of being in like a fucking coma or something, and Dumbledore's waxing all fucking poetic, and Harry's like, and he's trying to make sense out of it all. And Harry wants to ask about, well, okay, so if the stone's gone, does that mean that who can't come back? And Harry's, Dumbledore's like, you can call him Voldemort. It's just a name, and it's kind of cool that that's one of Dumbledore's like big things, and it becomes one of Harry's big things too. Is like, just fucking say it. It's just a word, which of course later, way later, not until book 7, it becomes more than just a word. It becomes a word that if you say it, like, you basically get tracked immediately. Which was a pretty clever move on the old Voldy's part. But anyway, after the whole name bit, Harry's like, okay, Voldemort, yeah, so he's still probably got other ways he could come back, doesn't he? He's not gone, like, for good, is he? And Dumbledore's like, no, not really gone for good. He's probably looking for another body right now, and he mentions, too, that not being truly alive, he cannot be killed, which is an interesting allusion to what's to come, but, I just mentioned that he left Quirrell to die, which is, again, like I said, different than how it works out in the movie with the disembodied, like, consciousness of Voldemort taking the form of, like, Quirrell dust. What the fuck? Yeah, and so, but basically Dumbledore's like, yeah, I mean, all it would take is another, like, person who's willing to fight this losing battle. And, maybe he can be delayed, and maybe he'll never come back. That old fucking Voldemort. And Harry's like, all right, okay. I got some other questions now that we're, at the end of the book. I mean, at this critical moment. I mean, I'm laying here and you're sitting there. Can I ask you more questions? And Dumbledore's like, okay. And Harry's like, I want to know the truth about these questions. And Dumbledore's like, oh, I already know where this is going. The truth he wants. Oh, well. And so Dumbledore's like, yeah, and he waxes about the truth. It's beautiful and terrible, and therefore should be treated with great caution. But in true Dumbledore fashion, he's like, I'll answer your questions unless I have a good reason not to, and I promise I won't lie. Which he won't. And of course, the first question that Harry asks is, he's like, Voldemort told me that he had to kill my mother. I mean, he killed my mother because she tried to stop him killing me. But he's like, why did he want to kill me in the first place? Because that seems kind of important. And Dumbledore's like, can't tell you that one. Sorry. I know. But no, not now. You will know. I promise you'll know. Which is, shitty, because it's like, you said you would, but you said you would. Okay, fine. Don't tell me. And this is, Dumbledore's, like, weakness. He doesn't want to lay the full burden of Harry's destiny, as it were, on his shoulders right now. He wants Harry to be able to kind of grow up semi-normal, since he's already popular and famous and, this, that, and the other. Like, he doesn't need the weight of all the truth right now. And then Harry asks about why Quirrell couldn't touch him. And Dumbledore explains the whole, how Lily dying to save Harry casts some sort of magical protection that is based in, like, the ultimate love, basically. Like, the love that a mother has for her child, or a parent even, for their child. That, and be willing to lay your life down for that other person. That kind of love leaves an imprint, is the idea. It's vague, but it's something that is basically used throughout the rest of the series as part of the interesting connection and disconnection between Harry and Voldemort. Because the two of them are intrinsically tied to this one moment where, in Voldemort trying to kill Harry, he was himself almost destroyed, and in the process, Harry was given this, like, protection from his mother being killed to save him. So anyway, right. So anyway, that protection, I mean, it acts like a force field almost. Like it and so that's why, that's the explanation given. Since Voldemort was inhabiting Quirrell's body, when Quirrell tried to touch Harry, he burned, because that's how strong the protection is. And that's apparently what happens to you when you try to touch a love-protected person. You get burned. Anyway, so, and that's that whole little story about, his mom dying to save him and everything kind of leaves him a little misty-eyed, and so Dumbledore happens to be very astutely checking out a bird on the windowsill, which gave Harry time to dry his eyes. Oh, Harry. And Harry's like, okay, so another thing, the invisibility cloak. And where did that come from? And Dumbledore's like, yes, your father happened to have left that in my possession when he died. And I thought I'd like it. And Dumbledore mentions that his father mainly used it for sneaking off to the kitchen to steal food, which of course is not true. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't do that too. We don't know even really, I don't think. But what they used it for the most back then was to get out of the school so they could transform into animals and then go do the full moon thing with Sirius. But anyway, doop doop doodle doo. And Harry's just like question after question, and he's like, so Quirrell said this thing about Snape, and it's funny, anytime Harry calls Snape, Dumbledore, in front of Dumbledore's like, Professor Snape, Harry. And Harry's always like, yeah, him. He never actually, like, I don't think, maybe not, I think never, maybe sometimes, but I think never Harry doesn't actually come back and say Professor Snape. He's like, yeah, that guy, or yeah, him. Which he does here. And he's like, yeah, Quirrell said that he was, he hates me because he hates my father. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, it's kind of like you at Malfoy, which is interesting because when Harry learns more about their rivalry or mutual loathing or whatever you want to call it, even though Dumbledore's given him a perfect mirror for it and saying, it's just like you and fucking Draco. Like, you guys hate each other and you will probably always hate each other, which actually turns out not to be true. But it would seem that way for, like, most of the series anyway. And that's not to say they ever become friends because, again, Cursed Child is fanfic. And so, who knows what actually happens between Harry and Draco later in life. I don't think they ever become like best buddies or anything, but they're definitely not the kind of enemies that James and Snape were until James died, and that was kind of young too. So it's not exactly the same. But anyway. So, but point being is that Dumbledore confirms that yes, in fact, Snape and James Potter were not friends at all. They kind of detested one another. And then it's mentioned that that James saved Snape's life, and Harry's like, what? Now you're really not making sense. And he's like, yeah, it's something that I don't think that Snape felt very good about ever, and that he feels Dumbledore thinks that or suggests that Snape looking after Harry this year was sort of his way of making them even for this thing that James did for Snape, which we find out later isn't exactly. I mean, it's a good thing that James did, but it's not like the full on. Like, Snape has reasons to not feel great about it too. It's not one sided, as is often the case. Anyway, let's see. And so Harry's like, okay, so you're saying what about? So they're even? What they can they okay. He's like, all right, fine. Next question. And he's like, how did I get the stone? And that's when Dumbledore. One thing about Dumbledore, he's mostly humble, kind of ish, but then he's also like not boastful, but he's not modest about his intelligence level. Like he's aware and he's really aware. And he's like, well, no, I'm glad you did ask me that part because that was one of my more brilliant ideas. And between you and me, that's saying something. Anyway, so he explains that the only way you could get the stone was if you were just trying to find it and not use it. If you were trying to find it. So basically his little magical test somehow divined your intention. And if your intention was pure, you could get the stone. If your intention was to use it for nefarious purposes or just to use it, I guess at all, then you would just see yourself doing it, the things that you would wanted to do with it, but not actually possessing the stone. And so, yeah, I mean, and that is, and I mentioned in an earlier episode about how like all the other protections on the stone were essentially just puzzles to be solved. And that's kind of true, but this one wasn't really. Like you couldn't trick the age line in Goblet of Fire into believing that you're older than you are, you couldn't trick the mirror into thinking that your intentions were pure when they weren't. So that's, that it kind of makes sense. Like that's actually a pretty foolproof. I mean, aside from like trying to figure out how the magic about that works, I mean, that's not really the point. The point is that it did work. Right. And so then, yeah, Dumbledore's like, all right, I'm going to get out of here. Have some of your sweets. And he's like, and we get a mention of Bertie Bott's Every Flavor Beans again, which is, a callback to like early on in the book when they're on the train. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, never really, I had a vomit flavored one once, and I've never really been into them ever since. But he's like, I'll try again. Here's a nice toffee, which I'm just gonna be like, really, toffee? That's the one you think is gonna? You think that's what that brownish gold color is? I guess so, but. And then, of course, in nibbling it, he's like, alas, earwax, which is pretty gross, but not as gross as vomit, probably. I don't know, pretty bad either way. And then we could fade to black again and fade back up, and now Ron and Hermione are trying to get into the hospital wing to see Harry, and they finally convince her, and she's like, all right, fine, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And they're both, obviously elated that Harry's awake, and they're like, all right, well, what really happened? And Harry gets to tell the story, and it's like one of those rare occasions when the truth is even more strange than the rumors. And so Harry recounts the whole story to them, and then we mention, okay, the stone is gone, and Flamel's gonna die. Ron's like, oh, shit. And Harry quotes Dumbledore back with the well-organized mind thing, death is but the next great adventure, and Ron's like, I always said he was off his rocker, which, no he didn't, I don't think, really, but whatever, Ron's hilarious. And so Harry asks about what happened to them, and Hermione's like, I got back fine, I got Ron back up, it took a minute, no big deal. And we were headed to the Owlry when we ran into Dumbledore and the entrance hall. Which, the entrance hall? Like, coming from the third floor corridor and going to the Owlry, did you really need to come all the way back down to the entrance hall? Surely, well, they're first years. Maybe they don't know how to get over there. But I'm like, surely there's a way to get there without having to go all the way back down to the fucking entrance hall. Anyway, they ran into Dumbledore there, Hermione says, and he knew immediately what was going on somehow. And he's like, he's gone after him. And Ron, as he often does, has like a little bit of an insight into a situation that you almost wouldn't expect him to. And it's like something that seems a little crazy on the surface, but entirely is likely. And Ron's like, do you think maybe he meant for you to do that? You know, giving you the invisibility. I mean, because he gave you a way to sneak around school. I mean, now that you know he gave you the cloak, like, you know that he knew you were going to use it to do things that you would get in trouble for, potentially, if people could see you. I mean, there's just no two ways about that. Like, you don't give an 11-year-old an invisibility cloak and expect them to just, like, keep it tucked away in their fucking trunk or, you know, underneath their mattress or something. Like, they're going out at night. Like, that shit is going down. And the mirror wasn't where it was just by accident, you know? Anyway. Right. We've discussed this before. And Hermione's like, well, that's terrible. And Harry's like, no. Actually, no. Dumbledore's just a little strange, but I think maybe he wanted to give me a bit of a chance. And that's when he says, yeah, I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here, which goes back to my whole thoughts about Fluffy and all that stuff. I mean, not Fluffy, I'm sorry, Norbert, the dragon, and all that nonsense. And Harry phrases it like, it's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could. And I mean, I think Dumbledore is curious about what happens when the two of them face each other. You know, since the first time around, it resulted in Voldemort being virtually or almost destroyed. And obviously, Dumbledore has like his hypothesis about what all this means. So, anyway. And so, yeah, and Ron's like, what? Yep, Dumbledore's crazy. And we get mention of the feast that's coming up the next day, and that Slytherin won the House Cup because of all the point situations, and how, since Harry wasn't there to play Seeker, that the final Quidditch match, they got killed by Ravenclaw. And so, yeah. And then Madame Pomfrey sends them out, and that scene ends, and we get to the last scene where Harry actually goes to the end of term, or whatever, the leaving feast, whatever they call it. And he goes and... Well, he hasn't gone yet, but Madame Pomfrey has said that he has said that he can go. And then he has another visitor, and it turns out to be Hagrid. And so this is another major difference. First of all, in the movie, the only visitor that Harry has in the hospital is Dumbledore, and then after that, it's just straight to the feast. Like the Harry and Hermione thing, I mean Ron and Hermione thing doesn't. I'm pretty sure. No, it doesn't happen. And the Hagrid thing doesn't happen either. Like, but there is like another. Like they weave Hagrid into it a little differently. I keep forgetting, like there's just like two scenes back now, but in the scene with Quirrell and Voldemort in the final chamber, in the movie, like Voldemort sort of like makes a weird bargain with Harry. I mean, he doesn't actually, but he proposes it. He's basically like, we can bring your parents back together if you join me. Anyway, that was just a strange like addition, like to create like a moral question for movie Harry to basically still say never, I'll never join you. So anyway, right, back to the feast. No, I'm sorry, back to Hagrid. Coming into the hospital wing, and so Hagrid's all like sad and he bursts into tears and he's blaming himself for everything because of how he told the stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was the only thing he didn't know, and I told him, and you could have died, and all for a stupid dragon egg. I'll never drink again. Of course you'll never drink again. And yeah, and of course Hagrid, in traditional Hagrid fashion, ends it really dramatically, and he's like, I should be chucked out and made to live as a muggle. And Harry's like, oh my god. Like, dude, I've been passed out for 3 days. And this is actually like a few days later after all that. But he's like, I mean, after everything that happened, like, it's over. And, like, it was Voldemort. Like, he would have found a way anyway. And Harry's like, I mean, then Hagrid, it's like, and don't say the name. And Harry yells Voldemort, of course, because that's what Harry does. And in doing that, Hagrid stops crying because he's so shocked at hearing the name yelled at him. And Harry's like, I met him, and I'm calling him by his name. And anyway, so he slowly gets Hagrid to sort of cheer up. And Hagrid's like, oh yeah, and I got you something. Which he does do in the movie too. It's just at the end. They have a little scene where Harry's getting on the train to leave Hogwarts for the summer, and he sees Hagrid and runs up to him and gives him a hug, and then Hagrid gives him the what it is it's a little book, and it's a picture book, and in this picture book is a bunch of pictures of Harry's parents at different times in their lives, I guess, from all their like school friends and stuff. And it's really sweet and it's really amazing, and it's the kind of thing that Hagrid does because Hagrid's awesome. As many people have been pointing out lately, he is. He's just it's interesting because Dumbledore as a character is also sort of like a he's like a father figure and a guiding force for like several either alone or abandoned characters. But Hagrid's just he's one of those people that like he sympathizes with the outcasts and the downtrodden, as it were. He knows what it's like, and he's sympathetic, and he does nice things for people who are having rough times, and that especially includes Harry, but it also includes Hermione and Ron at different times too. Anyway, and other people, I'm sure, in the past. So anyway, so yeah, that's awesome, and Harry can't even like speak to respond to say how much he likes it, but Hagrid seems to understand, and then we end scene and we fade back up to the feast finally. And the Great Hall is already full when Harry shows up, and the Slytherin banners are everywhere. All the colors and decorations are green and silver. And because there's Slytherin has supposedly won the House Cup for the year, and for the 7th year in a row. Or do they? Dun dun dun. And of course, when Harry walks in, there's like a sudden hush, and then all of a sudden, everybody's talking loudly. And he gets to the table and slips in between Ron and Hermione. And everybody's like looking at him and standing up and being, what children are, which is obnoxious, basically, a lot of times. Fortunately, Dumbledore shows up soon, which, I mean, why wouldn't he have already been there when he arrived? Who knows? Anyway, so we get to his speech, and kind of just talks about learning, and then the summer off to empty your head so you can refill it again. It's a very English thing to say, I think. And so then the topic is then moved to the House Cup, and the points are given as they stand, which puts Gryffindor in last place, Hufflepuff in third, Ravenclaw in second, and Slytherin in first. And everybody's like, yay, or everybody at the Slytherin table's like, yay, we're the best, fuck you guys. And everybody else is like, oh, Slytherin again, damn it. And Harry sees Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table because, that's what you do when you're winning, I guess. And it's a sickening sight for Harry. Oh, okay, Harry, tell us how you really feel, son. And Dumbledore's like, yep, that's super great, Slytherin. Good job. But, got some last minute points to dish out. And, first he calls out Ron, and he says that for the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, which strangely I remember in the movie being these many years, which was like sort of to say that the best game of chess ever at Hogwarts. Best game ever. Ron is then awarded 50 points for Gryffindor. So Gryffindor start cheering, and they nearly raise the roof. Well, it says they nearly raised the bewitched ceiling, but you get the idea. And we get Percy boasting about Ron being, the one who got past McGonagall's chess set. Because, Percy. And then Hermione is given her award for her use of cool logic in the face of fire, and another 50 points. And Hermione apparently burst into tears, And thirdly, Harry's name is mentioned, and that's when everybody's like, oh. And the whole room goes deadly quiet. And Dumbledore, for Harry, he awards 60 points for pure nerve and outstanding courage, which is basically like, Gryffindor's in like the most succinct summary possible. And so everybody's like freaking out because they realize that now not only has Gryffindor moved all the way up, they are now tied for first with Slytherin. And everybody's like amazed, but then like Harry's like, damn it. All he had to do is give one of us like a few more points. WTF. And then Dumbledore gets their attention one more time, and we realize that he's not completely done, that he's not just calling out the trio. And he kind of like indirectly explains why he's about to give out these last points. And he talks about how there's all kinds of courage, and it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but it takes just as much to stand up to our friends. Which, I mean, he could have even said sometimes it takes more, but whatever. And so he awards 10 points to Neville. And that's when everybody goes nuts, because not only is the Gryffindors going crazy, but of course Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff are like, excited too, because, fuck Slytherin. That's why. And we get another look at Malfoy after this news, and now he looks stunned and horrified. No more goblet banging on the table for young Master Malfoy. And Dumbledore's like, which means... calling over everything, because again it's mentioned that everybody except for Slytherin's like losing their mind right now. And anyway, so Dumbledore's like, let's swap out the old draperies there. Let's change the banners. Let's do it all. And he does some hand clapping, because there's a lot of that in this book. Or maybe there's not a lot. Maybe this is the second time it happened. But it's an interesting thing, and it happens in the movie too. And he claps, and then everything that's silver and green turns to scarlet and gold instead. And the serpent is replaced with the Gryffindor lion, and Snape and McGonagall are shaking hands, and Snape catches Harry's eye, and he knows that Snape still hates him. But Harry doesn't worry with this time. It's not the same as the first feast, because there's like sort of a callback there too, to when he sees Snape at the high table for the first time, doesn't even know his name is Snape, doesn't even know who he is, and he gets a bad feeling and his scar hurts. This time he's just like, yep, Snape still hates me. But he's like, at the same time, it's like, well, everything's back to normal. At least as normal as it is at Hogwarts. At least that's what Harry thinks. And it ends up being like this really great night. Feast is great, etc., etc. Obviously, they won the House Cup. And it says that it's better than winning at Quidditch or Christmas or knocking out mountain trolls. He would never, ever forget tonight. And we have one more scene after that. And so they get their exam results, and he and Ron passed, which they were like somewhat surprised about, but of course not really, because they had Hermione helping. And even Neville manages to pass. We get that mention early on that he's good at herbology and of course horrible at potions. We already knew that about potions though. And just mention that Goyle happened to pass also, to their dismay. And then we're moving along, and they're packing, and their trunks are packed, and they've got Neville's toad again. Oh, Trevor. And we get the notes that are mentioned that, magic over the holidays is forbidden, and Fred Weasley bemoans this notice, always hoping they'll forget. And I kind of forgot this, even though it's like a minor detail, but Hagrid actually takes the first years back across the lake to get to the train in Hogsmeade at the end of term 2, not just at the beginning. Even though there is no more mention of that little harbor that they come in on, but whatever. And so they're on the Hogwarts Express, and they're eating the sweets, and they're doing the things, and they're passing the Muggle towns, and the next thing you know, they get to King's Cross, and then they're coming back through the barrier, and Ron's like, you gotta come stay this summer, and I'll send you an owl. And Harry's like, yeah, I'm gonna need something to look forward to, because I'm going back to Shitsville, England. And now everybody's like calling after Harry, and Ron's like, still famous, which it's like one of those things where like Ron admires his friend, but Ron also envies his friend, so we're getting a little like glimpse of both in that little comment, and Harry's like, yeah, I'm not famous where I'm going. Like, trust me, where I'm headed, it just fucking sucks. So, don't think too much about these people just calling my name out. And the Weasleys are there at the train station, of course, and Ginny's like, there he is, talking about Harry. Which is, it's almost creepy, but then you think about how young Harry is, and so by the time Harry and Ginny, they're old enough. It's just weird because in this context, Ginny's like the little girl and Harry's like a slightly older little boy. Anyway, but that's how it always is when you're kids, and then you get older and you're like, oh, we're practically the same age. And of course, Mrs. Weasley's like, yeah, that's great. I have eyes. I can see that that's Harry Potter, and you don't point, Ginny, for fuck's sake. and so, yeah, Mrs. Weasley speaks to Harry, and he thanks her for the gifts at Christmas. And she's like, oh, it's nothing, dear. And then fucking Uncle Vernon is there. Ready, are you? Because, still a dick. And also still purple-faced, and also still mustached, and also still looking furious at the nerve of Harry. And so, yeah, and Petunia and Dudley are there, and they look horrified at the sight of Harry. And, of course, Mrs. Weasley, being a sweet lady that she is like, you must be Harry's family. And Uncle Vernon's all like, in a manner of speaking, because, he's a dick. And so he's like, yeah, hurry up, we ain't got all day, blah, blah, blah. And Harry's like, just hangs back for one last little moment with Ron and Hermione, and Hermione's like now looking like, oh, that's who you're going home with? Fuck, sorry about that. Have a good holiday. And so, yeah, and Harry's like, guess a little grin comes over his face, and Harry says, they don't know we're not allowed to use magic at home. And he mentions that he's going to have fun with Dudley this summer. Incidentally, in the movie, Hagrid, who's not, well, generally Hagrid's not like a mischief encourager. But in the movie, he's like, your cousin doesn't know you're not supposed to do magic. You could just, threaten him with some ears to go with that tail of his. Which, of course, the tail's been removed, but that's not discussed in the movie, so that joke works. Anyway, and yeah, that, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else that doesn't like ladies or gentlemen as their title, that is the end of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and I believe... Holy shit. I believe that we have eclipsed the longest episode at this point. So, as I mentioned early on, a very special Harry Potter Abridged has now come to a close. The plan is to forge ahead. So, episode 18 will be Chapter 1 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which we will try to get cooking up pretty soon. And hopefully it's not as long of a chapter as this one, and I won't have as many things to say. But anyway, as always, your likes and your comments are always appreciated. You guys are awesome, and yeah, stuff like that. I'm going to enjoy the last 40 minutes of my birthday. And I will see you very, very soon. Peace.